Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is Genevieve Collins, the Texas Director of Americans for Prosperity. Genevieve, thank you so much for joining me.
Good morning. Happy to be here.
Good morning. As we know, we are 2 months out from an election. Immigration continues to be one of those top issues facing voters. You are a self-described hardcore Texan. So as a hardcore Texan, can you describe for us what the situation on the ground is like?
Sure. Well, Texas has taken the brunt of 3.5 years of illegal immigration. We've seen the federal government, specifically the Biden Harris administration, abdicate its duty in securing our border, but more importantly, making sure our citizens are safe, whether that's all along the Texas border or throughout the rest of the southern border. We've also seen the largest caravans of illegal immigration ever before. And because of Kamala Harris's role in supposed to kind of handle the border crisis, we've seen that every state is now sharing the burden of becoming a border state. So immigration is a top issue. It is the number one issue in Texas during the primary season. It is the number two issue after the economy in the state of Texas. And I think that what's interesting, immigration's always and border security is always a big issue in Texas, but now we're seeing it really ripple across the rest of the country and it being a continued top issue. And you can really see the difference between the candidates and their policy versus also what the reality of their leadership looks like.
Let's talk about that because we've seen 3 years of Vice President Harris in this administration. We also saw 4 years of Trump ahead of or before that. And even the Biden administration has seen record high migrants coming across the border, but President Trump, while he was president, there were hundreds of thousands of migrants coming in then. So what do you think are the biggest differences between both policies?
Well, first off, I think that there's the Trump administration. So, yes, they had a lot of migration as well, but they also had a focus on border security. And there was a whole bunch of cacophony around the border wall, or I like to just think of it as a larger infrastructure package. And that being, I believe Kamala Harris called it a vanity project, and Democrats thought that it was a horrible kind of old way of doing immigration policy. Whereas I think President Trump, because he had a vision for border security, was able to kind of begin to put us on a path towards that issue or towards more border infrastructure. And to be honest, in Texas, we've had border walls since the 1990s, right?
Like you said, Texas has had border walls since the 90s. That was a huge point of contention in the Trump presidency, as we remember. But I wrote down something that you said. You called it a larger infrastructure package. Do you think if it was packaged that way, people would be more on board with that? Which sounds silly, but the politics of the wall were very divisive just a few years back.
Yeah, I'm not sure that anyone, the Republicans or Democrats, will get on the same page with just a better marketing plan. We've seen that that's fallen apart. Unfortunately, at Americans for Prosperity, we believe in a larger infrastructure package, that it's border secure. It's not just a border wall. Customs and Border Protection, they need physical barriers to really drive people towards it, one central point of entry versus having a porous border. But we need more than just a wall. It's technology. It's being able to equip border agents with the different types of vehicles that they can go secure our border. Or, in Texas, we've had to have the buoys in the Rio Grande River to stop that illegal migration. So infrastructure really, to me, is the key source of border security. When we get the infrastructure package right, then we're going to be able to really tackle the next big issue, which is immigration reform, asylum reform, appointing more federal judges, and really changing how we look at immigration, but also know that we need immigration. We need more people to come here. We need people to fill jobs, that we are open and we want people to come and be a part of this great country. But we need to really stop the bleeding before we can actually begin the bigger issue of asylum reform and things of that nature.
Vice President Kamala Harris was asked about immigration, the administration's policies, her history on it, and she said this in a CNN interview last week. We have laws that have to be followed and enforced that address and deal with people who cross our border illegally, and there should be consequences. And as a presidential candidate this time around, she seems to have adopted a tougher stance on immigration than she did when she was running for president 4 years ago. So what are your thoughts on this new approach?
Well, I wish she would have started it 3.5 years ago. She is in the job. She was appointed to oversee our border. So she has been in the job and in the role for the last 3.5 years. Well, where was she on these really solvable problems that she now believes that she has those answers to over the last 3.5 years? And I think that Texans certainly believe that she has flip-flopped tremendously just to get voted into office. And her California principles, or she says her values haven't changed. I watched that same CNN interview. Well, what are those values? When you first said we're for open borders running for president, that we will provide amnesty, we will provide all of these components, where are those your values? Because you're on record saying that, or are your values now these totally different 180-degree change of, no, we want border security? So I think that it's very unclear, and I don't think voters actually have a real understanding of where she is because she's not been clear about it.
Do you think her saying that we need to have consequences, we have laws that need to be followed, clearly this is tougher than what she said in 2019. Do you welcome this, what many have called a flip-flop, or are you concerned with she gets into office and this is empty rhetoric?
Personally, I'm concerned that it's empty rhetoric. Her voting record, she has a record, and that is a baseline of how she will govern. And, her home state is providing free health care to illegal immigrants. They're now potentially providing housing subsidies to up to I think $150,000 for illegal immigrants. Now, I can't remember if that's the right number, but they're treating illegal immigrants better than their own citizens. And so my concern, and I think most Americans should be concerned, that it's empty rhetoric.
I know that she was asked then point blank, you've been in office now 3.5 years. Why has there not been as serious, staunch action as the border as you're talking about now? And she said that she supported the bipartisan border deal. She blamed former President Donald Trump for having his allies in the House kill it because it was an election year. What do you make of that? And was that bipartisan deal something you supported?
AFP, Americans for Prosperity, was integral in working on that bill. It was necessary that we actually begin to tackle this issue. It was frustrating as someone that works in public policy that it took 3.5 years for anyone to kind of put pen to paper on the policy versus just use it as a political football. Here in Texas, our Texas members said, you know what, this doesn't go far enough. And I spoke to a lot of our members, and they said, this is not far enough on illegal immigration. They're allowing too many illegals to come in on a daily basis. This isn't real, meaningful border security policy. This is more immigration reform. And I think Republicans in the House wanted border security first and immigration reform second. And I think that when they put together this massive bill that tried to do a little bit of everything, kind of turns out when you try to do everything, nothing kind of happens. And I think that that's why we saw the whole bill fall apart and blow up.
Let's say in November we see a divided government again, where Republicans and Democrats are forced to work together to compromise. Where do you think they can compromise when it comes to immigration, when it comes to border security, that you think we will be able to see and Texas will be able to see the most tangible results?
Well, I think that divided government is a good thing. I think I might be a bit of an anomaly, but I personally like to see divided government because it forces everyone to actually work together. So in that vein, if we prioritize border security and actually talk about what an infrastructure package looks like, whether it's, more wall, whether that's more technology, drones, whether that's actually funding all of our customs and border protection to their full funding limit, and allowing for more border agents. I think we're short 3,000 to 5,000 border agents across the country. Solving that problem will be important, from a congressional level, and then being able to really say we need serious asylum reform. We need to really understand how many people should be coming into our country, and we need more judges. We need to adjudicate these cases much faster. I think that there's an opportunity to do that. I think the biggest question mark will be who ends up winning the White House in November. There's a very specific narrative around each candidate, and I think that kind of globally, one candidate is associated with very closed borders, and there's another candidate that's associated with very open borders. And so those narratives are going to drive what Congress is actually going to do, and which I think is unfortunate because it is Congress's job to actually do the bills, not the executive branch's job.
It's a tight election. It's a tight race, as we all know. So let's say either Trump or Vice President Kamala Harris get elected in November. Their first days in January. What's your message to them? First day in office, what do you want them to? What action do you want to see them complete at the border day one?
Well, day one, I want to say either candidate secure the border. That we are going to support our customs and border protection agents. We're going to support ICE. These are the people on the front lines. They're suffering the most with the highest suicide rates, highest mental health crisis in the internal or within our agencies. So we're going to fund and support those agencies. We're going to work to push to create more infrastructure, and we're going to make sure that we're keeping the communities that live along the border safe. Whether it's from fentanyl, whether it's from cartels, we're going to protect American citizens, and we're going to prioritize their safety.
I feel really lucky in my role here. I've talked with Democrats, Republicans, everyone in between. And when the conversation turns to immigration, everyone has said there is a crisis at the border. It's humanitarian. There's a security crisis at the southern border. And it has become, as many have said, it's now a state problem. Every state is a border state. As someone in Texas, what do you think is missing then from the national dialogue when it comes to immigration, when it comes to border security?
How expensive it is to really focus on keeping the communities safe, whether that's, through, in Texas taxpayers are fronting the burden for Department of Safety. We're funding our own border wall, where we had to fund the buoys that were in the Rio Grande River. So there's a huge funding component that's not being talked about at all. There's a safety, there's a security standpoint. There's also what happens when people get here, the humanitarian aid that is required. These are huge dollars that taxpayers have no idea how much their money is going towards. And then we see in other states, some states are sanctuary states or cities and states, versus not, and the public policy that's being done for Americans versus illegal immigrants. We're just not seeing the whole funding number, and I think that that's something that's being hidden and doing a real disservice to the American people. And I say that because Americans are incredibly generous. We want to help. We want to do right by people, and we want to provide freedom, opportunity, and prosperity to all. That is an American characteristic. That doesn't mean that we're against immigration, right? But we need to actually understand the tax dollars that we're putting towards this to help solve the problem. And when people have more insight, things would change much quicker, I imagine.
Well, this is a problem that's going to persist throughout the election and beyond. So I hope you come back on, join me, have more conversations on this. Genevieve Collins, thanks so much for joining me.
My pleasure. Thank you.